On June 10th, 1912, in Villisca, Iowa, a lady named Mary Peckham was hanging out the washing when she noticed a, quote, odd stillness from her next-door neighbours. Little did she know that they had all been brutally struck with an axe and had their faces beaten in with the blunt end of it. The family that was killed was known as the Moore family. They were known to be quite popular and prosperous in that area at the time. The father was a man named Josiah, a businessman known as JB or Joe. The mother was a woman named Sarah. She was a full-time housewife like most mothers at the time. Josiah and Sarah had 4 children together, 11-year-old Herman, 9-year-old Catherine, 7-year-old Boyd, and 5-year-old Paul. With so many kids, it's understandable why Mary found the silence worrying, so she decided to call up Josiah's brother Ross to come check on them. He arrived and opened the door with his key, immediately found blood and told Mary to quickly fetch the town marshal. Marshal Henry Hank Horton arrived and was horrified at what he found. According to him, there was, quote, somebody murdered in every bed, which is honestly a fantastic observation on his part. Well done, Hank. Anyway, off topic. He fetched Dr. J. Clark Cooper, a physician, to examine the scene. The verdict came back that every member of the family had been attacked with an axe, along with 2 family friends, Lena and Ina Stillinger. They also found that Josiah had been given the most blows out of everyone in the house. Sadly, this was one of those cases that was handled poorly. To begin with, 100 people, yes that's right, 100 people had already walked through the house before it was cornered off, so all possible evidence was gone, since most of the town had trotted on through because the police failed to corner off the area. So to begin with, one of the first questions they had was why the Stillinger girls were at the house in the first place. They found out it was because the Moores were at the church watching the Children's Day exercises. So it was, quote, safer to stay with the Moores than to walk home in the dark, which is the most upsetting sentence I've ever heard. The 2 Stillinger girls were actually misidentified to 2 other girls at one point too, which just adds to the poor way they handled this crime. Yes, I know that their faces were butchered, but also, you can notice when people are missing from your own downtown. Lena and Ina were also deemed the first people to die because they were 1 downstairs and 2, one of the girls had a defensive wound, suggesting she had tried to block a blow with her arm. It is also possible that Sarah had awoken during the night because, get this, a neighbour told the police she thought she heard Sarah's voice in the night yelling, quote, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I mean, what did she think was happening? The first idea they had was to investigate if the vicious attack was a robbery. However, no valuables had been taken or disturbed, so the evidence would seem to show that the killer was in no rush. In fact, they had taken time to partially clean the murder weapon before leaving it propped up against the wall of the downstairs bedroom. There were some other odd elements that still perplex researchers to this day, such as a slab of bacon being left leaning against the wall next to the axe, with another piece found on the piano in the parlour. A bowl of bloody water and a plate of uneaten food were also found. Lena's nightgown was also pushed up, however the doctors deemed she was not sexually assaulted. So the evidence seems to show that the killers broke into the house and worked their way up, killing everyone in the process. However, 2 cigarette butts were found in the attic, so it's possible that there was more than one killer and that they were already in the house, which takes me on to my next section. So basically, since the police failed to corner off the area, the only evidence they had was basically gone forever. So the only other thing they could conclude was that it could have possibly been a relative of the Moore family. A few names were tossed around at the beginning, such as Samuel Moyer, the brother-in-law of Josiah, who was in fact arrested but let go because he had an alibi. A man named John Van Glider, who was a former brother-in-law of Sarah, was also suspected, although nothing came of it. The only other evidence they could go off was tips from the local townspeople, which were extremely useless because they had no leads and most of them sounded fake. One good lead they did have came from May Van Glider, the 16-year-old niece of Josiah and Sarah. She said that the Saturday before the murder, a stranger approached her and asked her where the Moore family lived. When May later told Sarah this, Sarah told her, quote, that a person matching that description had been hanging around outside the house. This information given by May caused the police to arrest a man in blood-stained shoes named Joe Ricks in Monmouth, Illinois. However, when May went to identify him, she said it was the wrong man, so it was a dead end. A second lead that ended in a dead end also happened when a supposed expert named C.M. Brown reached out to the detectives, claiming he could get, quote, an image of the killer from Lena's retina. The theory was that because she had awoken during the night, the retina would have imprinted the last thing she saw. The evidence came back and Brown described a man with, quote, stout build, very broad shoulders and extraordinary length between the hips, which is obviously an incredibly unusual build to see in a man in a farming town. Not. There were some promising leads that did help. One of these came from Cora McCoy, who lived 2 blocks away from the Moore's house. She claimed to see 2 strangers walk by the house at around 3 p.m. on Sunday afternoon, the day before the murders. The men were, quote, walking close together, as if talking confidentially. McCoy claimed she saw the men again at dusk. One of them looked like a man named William Blackie Mansfield, who was a supposed army deserter and a, quote, cocaine fiend, who actually was suspected of a similar axe murdering to his wife, daughter, father-in-law and mother-in-law 2 years later. A woman named Mary Landers also saw 2 strange men walking towards their house. She said they, quote, paused to look at the Moore's axe, which was in the front garden on a chopping block. So, with no helpful leads or any evidence, all the people of the town could do was theorise, which brings me on to my next section. Several witnesses said they saw Iowa Senator Frank F. Jones and his son Albert in town at the time of the murders. Now, this might seem harmless, however, Josiah was apparently an old friend of theirs and had just left Senator Jones's farming equipment company to start a competing business against him. Jones was reportedly upset by Josiah's departure and also the fact that Josiah had nabbed a lucrative John Deere contract. Furthermore, there were rumours that Josiah was sleeping with Jones's daughter-in-law, aka Albert's wife, so there was definitely bad blood between them. But was it enough to kill? 3 local men, Fred Fryer, Frank Millhiller and Vern Robinson, all reported seeing Josiah talking with Jones's son a few hours before the murders. However, a man named Jim Bridgewell said he saw Albert Jones with Villisca Hall pool owner W.B. Burt McCall. And furthermore, garage owner E.M. Nelson said he spotted McCall behaving suspiciously and in a rush at about 9 p.m. on the night of the murders. Several witnesses also said that McCall was found, quote, bragging about having a piece of Josiah's skull. Who does that ever? Does he want to be caught? However, he explained he had picked it up whilst walking around the house, which is fair enough. We all pick up bits of dead people when we see them, no shame there. All of these ideas led to the conspiracy theory that Senator Jones, Albert Jones, Blackie Mansfield and Burt McCall had worked together. A detective named James Wilkerson, who worked for the renowned Burns Detective Agency, was also hired to investigate the killings after the police failed to find anything. In 1916, he announced he had solved the case and explained that Senator Jones had in fact hired Blackie Mansfield to kill Josiah for the bad blood they had between them. This theory was supported by a woman named Alice Willard, who said her car had broken down near the Moore house. and she'd heard, quote, the phrases "money Sunday after church" and "get Joe first, the rest will be easy." She recognised one of them as Senator Jones. What I wonder though is, why did it take 4 years to tell everyone this? Anyway, Wilkerson's claims were heralded by headlines. One particular one from Marshalltown, Iowa, saying, quote, "Great crime in Villisca is now solved. These allegations were brought before a grand jury, but Mansfield's employer provided records saying he was in Illinois at the time of the murders, so Mansfield was never charged with anything." A man named Lynn George Kelly was actually convicted and sent to court because he left town on a train early in the morning at about 5:20 a.m. before the bodies were discovered. He allegedly told travellers, quote, "There are 8 dead souls back in town who have been butchered in their beds." He also claimed to have heard the, quote, "thuds of the axe." However, evidence also suggested he was schizophrenic. The jury acquitted Kelly, however, so he was a free man. He did at one point confess, however later revoked it, claiming police brutality. So whether or not he did it, we do not know. So, we have made it to the conclusion. Sadly, this is where most of the story ends, which leaves us with one final question. Who did it? Was it Burt McCall? Did he really go through all the trouble to kill 8 people? He is a likely suspect, as he was seen rushing about on the night of the murders. But could he have really had the willpower to kill that family and those 2 poor girls? Or did Senator Jones hire Blackie Mansfield to do it? He was a cocaine fiend after all. Was Alice Willard telling the truth about breaking down outside the Moore's house? Or was that a fabricated lie? She did wait 4 years to tell everyone, so was she bribed by James Wilkerson to testify for him? Why was there 2 cigarette butts found in the attic? And who was the mystery man that Sarah said was hanging around outside the house? Was the axe murderer a serial killer that randomly targeted people? After all, there were a series of axe killings around the area at the time. Maybe a copycat killer. Was it Lynn George Kelly? He did supposedly know that 8 people had been killed. Or was that a lie too? Made up by random people to get 5 seconds of meaningless fame. Why did he confess? The police really that harsh? I guess this is just one of those mysteries that will forever remain unsolved. Hello, this is Octaps. So what did you think of the video? Let me know down in the comments, and if you liked what you saw, consider subscribing, because there's more of where that came from. Yeah. You can also follow me on Twitter at octaps_docs to keep up with me in general, if you want. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.